Hey, welcome back, and in this video we're going to go back to esbuild for a little bit. So as you know, esbuild is a super fast JavaScript bundler, and think of it as the main contender as a replacement for webpack. And why is that? And that's mainly because webpack is super slow, I mean really slow. So if you can take webpack out of the equation and replace it with esbuild, then your development workflow is going to be much faster, and you're going to be a happier developer. Now, didn't I cover this in my previous video? And well, yeah, I did, and I really go into the deep dive of how esbuild works. But actually, one of the things that I kind of showed in that video is that actually you don't really need to use things like create React app. You can actually just do that manually and build your boilerplate and your scaffolding yourself, right? But actually, even myself, I find myself whenever I create a React app, I use create React app. So what I thought I'd do in this video is show you how you can sculpt out webpack and then replace it with esbuild, and therefore you're going to be much faster kind of going forward. So let me show you how that works and we'll just get started. Alrighty, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what we all do and then just do a create React app from the terminal, and then we'll get it started up and we can all appreciate how slow webpack is, and then we'll replace it out with esbuild. So to do that, we'll just type in npx create React app, and then we'll give it a name of esbuild React app. And we're just going to hit that, and that's going to take about a minute or so to get that created and scaffolded up for the first time. So let's just cd into the new application that we've just scaffolded up, which is esbuild React app. And as you can see, as you would expect, there's a README, there's a package.js and all the source files. And in fact, if I wanted to just start it up, I could just type in npm start, and then that will spin up the application. And you can see it takes quite a bit of time to get that up and running. So if I click on here, localhost 3000, you can see my React app is up and running. And if I want, let me just kill that for a second. We'll open up VS Code, and then as you can see, if I come into source and then the app.js, there's our application. You see this kind of edit code, app.js, and save to reload, etc. So I mean, I'll add an extra dot in there for a second. Let's do another npm start. And as you can see, it just takes a bit of time to get up and running, right? It's not massively slow, but it's slow enough. And you see, there you go. You've got the extra dot in there. Let's come back into VS Code for a second. We'll make a quick change. We'll add another dot on there. We'll just save that. And then it's kind of updated. It's not the slowest in the world, but it still annoys me. It's not fast enough for my liking. It takes a little bit too long. And we can even do an npm run build there for a second. So if I run that for a second, it's going to create an optimized production build. And that takes time, right? So if you can kind of see there, that took a good few seconds. If I just clear it again and then we run the build again one more time, few seconds. You know, not the fastest in the world. So I want to speed up that workflow. I want to use esbuild because it's much faster. It's a tool I much more prefer. I think it's going to be the winner in the race. So now that we understand how to get our React application scaffolded up using create React app, how could we then start replacing the elements within the scaffolded create React app and use esbuild instead? Well, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into Visual Studio Code. We're going to close down the app.js for a second, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go into our package JSON. And then, as you can see, there's a couple of scripts here. So there's a script called React Script Start, and there's one called React Scripts Build. So when you do an npm run start or an npm run build, these are the scripts that are getting called. So out of the box, the create React app has some of these pre-built scripts that will do all the bundling and start up your services, etc. So that is the bit that we are going to replace today, so that we're no longer using webpack and we're using esbuild instead. So how am I going to do that? Well, the first thing I need to do is I need to install esbuild onto my machine. So in this create React app folder that I've got just now, the one we just scaffolded up, esbuild React app, what we need to do is install esbuild as a dev tool. So to do that, I can do an npm install --save-dev, and then we'll put esbuild there. So that'll take a few seconds, and that will install esbuild, and that will be added as a dev dependency in your package JSON. So actually what's happening underneath the covers is when I install esbuild, using npm, then it's actually installed the esbuild command line tool into my node module. So if I go into cd node modules, and then if I cd into esbuild, let's just clear that for a second. You can see there's a readme, a bin, blah, 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 and install.js. If I go into the bin, you'll see there is esbuild there. And if I were to run esbuild -- version, for example, then you can see it's going to come back with a version, which is 0.1438. So esbuild is a command line tool. It's installed in a bin. So you now understand a little bit underneath the covers. By installing esbuild as a node module within my package JSON, that means that I'm going to have access to that as part of my npm scripts. So let's come back up the chain a little bit again and bring ourselves back to our kind of root directory there. So we're within the esbuild React app. We now understand that esbuild is there. It's a command line tool, and if you watch my previous video, I go in a lot of detail of how esbuild works, and we explore the command line. We do things like bundling. We even do some translation from TypeScript to JavaScript, etc. So there's a whole deep dive in that, and I recommend you checking that out. But today, what we're going to do is just use the tool directly. So I'm going to come back into Visual Studio Code for a second. And in order to do a build with esbuild, rather than using the React-scripts build, which is the out-of-the-box script provided by Create React app, which uses webpack underneath, what I'm going to instead do for the bundling is I'm going to use esbuild. And to access that, I just need to type in esbuild here, because it is installed as a dev dependency, so the npm scripts has access to that. And therefore, what I can do is just pass in some parameters like I would with the command line. So in this case, I want to essentially bundle up my index.js. So if I look here, I've got source, and then you see the index.js. That's and I can open that up. That's our application. That's what I want to do the bundling of. So that's what I'm going to put in there. And then the next thing is I can just pass in any arguments that I want. So if I do a -- bundle, so I'm saying I want to create this as a bundle, and I want this to be outputted to a file. And I think what I will do is put it in public, and we'll put it in JS, and we'll call it app.js. So what we're going to do is bundle everything up into an app.js file, and that's going to end up in this public folder, and then it will be available here, and we can use that. I mean, if I wanted to, I don't need to call it JS. I could put dist. That's fine as well. And then the last thing that I want to then do is say that because I'm using React, I also want to support JS files and JSX files as well. So to do that, I would just put loader, and then I'll just put .js equals JSX, and that gives me the loader. Now, all of this I could do with the CLI, and again, go check out my video that I created earlier with the deep dive into esbuild, and that will give you more details on how to do that. But the key thing that this is going to do is now when I type in npm run build, rather than using React scripts build, it's now going to use my esbuild to do that build and bundling. So if I come back into the terminal, and let's just clear that, and if I do an npm run build, and what's going to happen is we're going to get an error coming back, and it's going to be fun. So as you can see there, it's coming back with no loaders configured for .svg files, source logo.svg, and you see this import from logo.svg, and that is, if we just come back to the app.js for a second, you will be able to see there's the import logo from logo SVJ that it's talking about. So in order to be able to support for that, you need to be able to use some plugins. Good news is esbuild has support for plugins. And again, I covered that in my other video, a deep dive in how to do that. But to make that work, we then need to add plugins. Now I could mess around with the CLI, but it's getting a little bit complicated. So what I'm going to do is create a JavaScript file to be able to do the bundling as well. So the good news about esbuild is it also has some npm packages that you can use, and essentially you can import as modules and then write JavaScript to do the bundling for you. Let me show you what I mean. So the first thing I need to do is I actually need to have a plugin that is going to allow me to deal with those inline images. So if I just open up a new tab, as you can see, there is an esbuild plugin that's already built here. The one we're going to use is called esbuild-plugin-inline-image. There's lots of different plugins that you have available in esbuild. So if you were to just do esbuild plugin and search on Google, you can see there's a whole sort of community of plugins that are available. So you can click here and there's a massive list of plugins you can use. So the one we're using is esbuild plugin inline image, but there's loads there, right? So you can use ones for CSS modules, you can use ones for Markdown, you can use one for WebAssembly, etc. There's a whole list, and again, I cover this in my other video, but we are going to use this esbuild plugin inline image. So if I just come back to my terminal for a second, I will just install that as a package. So npm install -- save deb. I want it as a development dependency. I don't need it for production. It's only for my CI/CD toolchain. We'll type in esbuild plugin inline image. So we'll install that. It'll take a few seconds. So with that installed, if we come back to our VS Code, and what I'm going to do now is create this esbuild script, which is we're going to use to build our application and include the plugin. So what I will do here is we'll just create a new script. I think we will call this esbuild-build.js, and then all I need to do is just start using the tool. So in this case, because I'm using JavaScript to do the bundling, then I'm going to use the esbuild package, as you can kind of see here as well. And I'm also going to use this new package that I've just brought in. So we'll just call require, and I think it was esbuild plugin dash inline image. And then in order to call this, what we want to do is call esbuild build. And then all we're going to do is add in basically the same parameters we were using in the CLI app to perform the code. So in this case, if you remember, one of them was entry points. So in this case, it was the .source index.js. So we'll put that in there. And then the next thing that we wanted to add is we said that we had an out file set to, I think it was -public, and then I was going to call it dist, if you remember, and we wanted it to be app.js. So we'll add that in there. And then because this is a production build, I want this to minify. So I'll just set minify equals true. And then I want this to bundle. So we'll say that's true as well. And then from a loader perspective, if you remember, I said what I was going to support. So in this case, JS, and I want a JSX. So we'll just put that in here as well. And the final part that we need to put in there is I want to support plugins. So if you remember, I've got this inline image. So this is the major reason where we're putting this in here. So I'm going to list the plugins that I'm going to use. So it was inline image. So the last thing I need to do here is, oh, I've messed up one of the brackets. So we'll just change this, and then we will put this here like this. Yeah, and I could end it here, but actually if there's an error, I just want to ignore it. So I'm just going to put in a little arrow function here where if there's an error, we will just exit out. So that is now our build script. Again, I go into a lot more detail on how to create a build script in my other video, but as you can kind of see from this one, really all I'm going to do is, rather than using the esbuild command line to perform the build, I'm going to use this piece of JavaScript to do that instead. And all it's going to be doing is using the index.js, which is the file that we showed earlier as our entry point. So that's our React application here. I'm going to output it to the public folder with a dist folder, and I'm going to call it app.js. I'm going to minify my bundle. I'm going to create a bundle, and I'm going to support JSX here as well. And then the final thing, and the major reason we're doing this, is I'm going to use this new inline image plugin that I've created. So now I've got my build script created. All I want to do now is come back to my package.json and get rid of this esbuild source index, etc., that I had there. So I don't need to run that as a command line build script anymore. And what I want to do now is run the esbuild-build.js file that I just created here. So to do that, I'll just type in node esbuild-build. .js, and you can see it's on my sort of top level root there. So now when I run npm run build, it is just going to execute node esbuild-build.js. So if I come back to my terminal, and then now if I type in npm run build, it's going to execute that esbuild-build.js that we created. And as you can see there, it came back with invalid option in build called minify. I can't spell minify. So let's come back into our package. Let's come back into our esbuild-build.js. Let's get rid of that extra I there because I clearly can't spell. And then we'll just do that one more time. So we'll do an npm run build, and you can see it has built. So we'll just clear this, and then if we come back into Visual Studio Code, now what we can see there, if we now go into the public folder, there should be a dist folder created, which wasn't there before, and then within that there's an app.js and an app.js, and you can see it's all been minified, etc. So we now have our application. So in theory, we should be able to run that, but again, I think we will run into a few issues. But let's see how we do that. So what I am going to do here is I'm going to use the HTTP server to get this started up. So if I just type in npx HTTP server, and I want this to run on port 3000, and what that'll do is create me up an HTTP server for whatever is in the current directory. So let's just run that. And we now have a web server running on localhost 3000. So if I just click on that for a second, you can see that it's called that, but I'm getting this sort of blank page. So, you know, it's kind of loaded it. You see the React app there, but it's not quite done everything that we need, right? Because I'm just getting this blank page at the moment. So one of the things we need to deal with that, is fix some URL resolving. So let me close this down here for a second. And this is probably a bit of a clue here. You see this get public URL favicon.icon. So that's actually what we want to be fixing up. Okay, so to get rid of that blank screen, there's a few things I need to do to make that application work. So the first thing I need to do is let's go into the public folder, and what I want to do is open up the index.html file. Now there's a few things I need to do within the HTML file to make this work, because this is a kind of template file. It's not an HTML file that can be used directly, and that's why you were getting all of those errors coming back saying public URL from the site. So what I need to do here is, first thing is get rid of this public URL script variables, and just clean that up a little bit here. So we'll just get rid of that, and we'll make it sort of /. I'm going to get rid of the comments as well. And what really works is during the kind of, you know, the React scripts build, what actually happens underneath the hood is it actually treats this HTML file as a template, and then it will work. And you kind of see that there. If you look here, it says this HTML file is a template. If you open the relevant browser, you will see an empty page, right? Blah, blah, blah. The build step will place the bundle skips into the body tag, blah, blah, blah. So what we need to do is make this HTML file not be a template, because we're not using React scripts build anymore, and we need to make it work ourselves. So we'll just get rid of all of this. And we've now got rid of the public URL, so this becomes an HTML file. But what we also need to do is actually add in the app.js file bundle that we've just created and the app CSS bundle that we've created as well. So to do that, we would just do a script, and we'll say the source is going to be equal to, and I think it's going to be in dist app.js. And I'm going to make that async, and we're going to defer that as well. So that gives me my JavaScript bundle, and then I want the same for my CSS. So we'll say that is going to be a link, and rel equals style sheet in this case. And then it is going to be at dist, and it's going to be app.css, and then we can just close that out. We'll save that. So that gets my HTML file into a suitable state. I've got rid of all of those public URL stuffs, and I've put my style sheet in the right place. Now, the next thing that I need to do is, if I look at the app.js file, one of the other things the build does is essentially imports React. So I just need to type in import React from React, and we'll save that off. So that should be everything I need to do now from the templates. And now if I was to build that and run that, it should work. So let's prove that. So if we just bring back up our terminal. So what we're now going to do is run an npm run build. And as you can see, that has now created our build scripts. And if we were to go into the dist folder, you should see that's all updated. And now, if I were to run an npx HTTP server again, then our application should work. So we'll just click on the 127.0.1.3000, and we'll just refresh that, and you can see our React application is now running, and there is no webpack involved. It is purely using esbuild. Now, of course, I've solved the build problem, but actually, what about doing an npm run start? Well, we can do a similar thing here as well. So if I just clear that, and we come back to Visual Studio Code, and we open up our package JSON again, in the same ways we've got that node esbuild.js, I guess there's nothing stopping us from writing npx HTTP server -p 3000, and then if I wanted to, I could now do an npm run start, and it's going to start like that. But that's kind of okay, but am I really doing any better than Webpack at that point, right? There's two things that I'm not doing. I'm not solving my minification problem, because actually I'm doing a minification because I'm just doing a standard build. I don't want to minify when I'm debugging. And then the second thing is I'm going to all the hassle of creating npx HTTP server. What I want to ideally do is use esbuild's own inbuilt serve, which it has, and then have a different build script for development where I'm not minifying my JavaScript. So let's show how that could work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to VS Code, and I'm going to take the esbuild.js. I'm just going to copy that, and then I'm going to rename this to esbuild, and we're going to call it serve. Yeah, and then we're going to mess around with this a little bit. So the good news is I still need my esbuild require. I still need that inline image, but rather than doing a build, what I want to do is call the serve. So esbuild comes with its own inbuilt development web server, and that's what I'm going to use in this case. So next thing I'm going to do is let me just close that out here, and then I'm just going to do this. And then that will mean we now have serve, and then we've got all of our entries. So to serve, I need to specify where I'm going to serve from. So we'll set the serve there, and we're going to set that to public because we want to serve from that public folder that we've got here. And again, the port that we set was for 3000, so we'll just set port equal to 3000. And now if we look at that, our entry points remain the same. Our out file remains the same. I don't want to minify though, so I'm just going to remove minify, and then I'm going to remain bundling. I'm still going to use JSX as well, and then I'm going to have my plugins for inline image. So I'm just going to save that. And now, if I were to come back into my package JSON, and now if I change the start script, so rather than using npx HTTP server p3000 or React scripts, what I can now do is node esbuild-serve.js. So if I save that, and then we come here, and I do an npm run start, and you can see it's now calling node esbuild-serve.js. And if I were to, let's close that for a second, and if I were to call localhost 3000, you can see it is now running my React application. So the good news is esbuild-serve has obviously got some capabilities for hot reloading and repackaging. So, and I can kind of prove that. So if I take my app.js here, and then I just go ... here, and then do a save, and then do a refresh, you can see the ... has been updated. Now, if I were to go into, let's say, my index.html, and then we call that React Apps, save that, do a refresh, you can see React Apps is updated as well. So I've got that that kind of ability to automatically underneath update the application. Now, it doesn't have a full hot reload like you do with a development server in Node.js. So in that particular case, if I use the out of the box create React app, then it will reload the application underneath. It doesn't have that capability with the esbuild, but I guess that could be something that could be built in at some point. If I really wanted as well, if I wanted to be super lazy and automatically launch the browser, I could change that start. So put an ampersand there and then say open HTTP localhost 3000, so that when I call my script there, so if I do an npm run start, you can see it automatically launches that in the browser. So if I want that capability in there, I can do that as well. Anyways, hope this has been useful to you. As I said, I've done a deep dive on esbuild already, where I really go into the details of all of the flags, how esbuild works, etc., how plugins work. I recommend you check that out. But hopefully this whistle-stop tour has been useful for you so that you can understand how to take the standard create React app scaffolded application and be able to modify that to use esbuild. Now, there's still a lot of messing around. I think maybe at some point I might end up creating a script just to automate that so that you can use esbuild underneath there. But hopefully, as it stands, it's been useful and you'll start to use esbuild in your applications. Now, where I'm probably going to go with this in the future is I genuinely think esbuild is a very, very cool tool, and I'm probably not a big fan of using Node.js servers for serving up static files. So you can probably guess where I'm going, where what I want to be able to do is start taking these bundles and then running them on faster and better web servers, you know, such as Actix or Salvo or something like that. So Rust-based servers that are going to run them much faster, and therefore start to create this hybrid experience, bringing the JavaScript and the Rust worlds together. Anyway, that's going to happen in future videos, but hopefully this one has been useful for you today.